Welcome to the Champs App podcast, where we help players and parents demystify the world of minor hockey development and recruiting for both girls and boys. On this episode, we talk with Rob Morgan, who is the head coach with the Long Island University women's hockey program. We talk about his lengthy coaching career in Canada, China, and the US, starting the LIU women's program from scratch, and his advice on the current recruiting environment. I really enjoyed this conversation with Rob, and I hope you do as well. Before we get to our guest, if you enjoyed this episode and want us to keep making more of them, please share it with teammates and friends. You can also subscribe, like, follow, and even better, it would be great if you would leave us a review. Now, let's drop the puck and get to the show. I'm very excited to have on the Champs App podcast, Rob Morgan, who is the head coach with the Long Island University Sharks women's hockey program. Originally from Medicine Hat, Alberta, Rob has had a long career in coaching, starting with Medicine Hat Minor Hockey Association, a couple of stops at Canadian University hockey teams with the University of Alberta and the University of Lethbridge, before taking his talents south of the border to Dartmouth, where he was an assistant coach. Then he was a head coach at D3's St. Norbert College, then back to the Ivy League with Yale before coaching professional women's hockey in China for a couple of years. In 2019, he started up the brand new women's hockey program at LIU, and they just started their third season in the NESCAC conference. Welcome to the podcast, Rob.
Thank you, Ray.
Hey, so why don't we start like we do all our guests? Why don't you tell us a little bit about your hockey history and growing up in wherever it was you were growing up playing hockey?
Yeah, no, I spent pretty much most of my time in Alberta growing up playing, and it's as long as I can remember back, my first times was in actually Edmonton. We lived there for a couple of years before my family eventually went to Medicine Hat. But I spent probably about 8 years there, playing youth hockey, and eventually got into the AAA programs, playing Pee Wee, Bantam, Midget, and had some great coaches along the way that forever will remember a lot of the things they imparted on me. And then I spent a couple of years playing junior hockey. Went up in Fort McMurray, Alberta, in the Alberta Junior League, and then was eventually traded and played in Olds.
You were growing up. Who was your biggest influences playing hockey? Was it one of your parents? Was it a sibling? Was it just a friend or a neighbor?
No, actually, when my family and I moved, I was born in Germany, in Iserlohn, and when we moved back to Canada, we spent some time in a little community called Logan Lake, British Columbia, and in that community, everybody played hockey. There was an outdoor rink and a lake that people skated on. So one day, my mom brought home a bunch of hockey sticks and some skates and said, "Here you go. If you want to, get involved with the community, take your skates down to the rink and play." And that's how it all started. So I mean, my mom and dad, they never played hockey. My two older brothers, they started playing hockey a little bit when we were in Germany, but when we moved back to Canada, when we were really young, they just, for whatever reason, didn't play anymore, and they got more into football and sports other than hockey. But myself, my younger brother, we played.
And were you playing on a lot of outdoor rinks, or was it organized hockey in arenas?
No, and probably my first 4 years, everything was outdoor rink. It was a real highlight when we got to play in an indoor rink. It's obviously it was quite cold, but that's all part of the experience. And I think why people talk a lot about the great outdoors and playing on outdoor rinks. As a matter of fact, when I was a Mighty Mite, I played for this guy, Mr. Bartman, Lloyd Bartman. He would tell us as youngsters to have our mom sprinkle some hot mustard in our skates, some powdered mustard, and the idea was, he said, it kept your feet warm.
And how did that work for you?
Well, it was a lot of stained socks, kept our feet warm or not, but it was probably his way of introducing the sports psych side of the game, because we never ever complained about our feet being cold. We just went out there and played.
Nice. So tell us about your junior hockey career and where you took it.
Well, my first junior experience was actually in Abbotsford. I was out trying out for the New Westminster Bruins at the time in the Western League, and then I got sent down to Abbotsford, and from there I went from Abbotsford on a long bus ride up to Fort McMurray, and Fort McMurray was really my first full year of playing junior hockey, and you know, a real eye opener back then. You know, we're talking the mid '80s and late '80s, and you know, things where it was tough, and you had to play a certain way, and if you didn't play a certain way, then you know you didn't last long. So you know, I had a, you know, decent first year, but then the following year I was traded to Olds, and it lasted about halfway through the season. Then there was another trade that happened, and at that point I said, I'm just going to go to college and start my college career. And so I started in Medicine Hat. Believe it or not, they had a college team that played in the Alberta Colleges Athletics Conference, and after that year the program folded, and then I ended up at Red Deer, and my last college coach was Mike Babcock.
And
who at the time was
former Toronto
starting his
coach. And
yeah, he was just starting his coaching career. So, you know, my college career was very short. It really was then where I got into coaching. You know, it got to a point where I wasn't able to continue to play anymore.
Looking back on your playing days, what's your favorite, you know, playing day memory, whether it's from youth hockey or playing juniors or university hockey?
Well, it was definitely youth hockey. Like I had an amazing time. We had great teams, and played with some really good players that went on and played professionally. And but there's no doubt about it. You know, the times that I had in Medicine Hat was definitely the greatest times in youth hockey for me.
Gotcha. And then you went back to Medicine Hat to help run the Minor Hockey Association. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually, what brought me back to Medicine Hat was I served as an athletics director at the college there. And while I was, you know, doing that job, I got really involved with youth hockey and had a great mentor, a guy by the name of Brian Ellerman, and was involved coaching the midget AAA boys team for a number of years, and then eventually, you know, found my way into the women's game.
Gotcha. Okay.
More by accident than anything.
Yeah. So, so tell us about the stops in Canada at the university. So you were at University of Lethbridge. We also at University of Alberta. Is that correct?
Well, what happened was after our first 2 years at Red Deer College, I transferred to U of A to finish my degree. While I was there, I didn't play. I was involved in coaching at the time, and at youth hockey.
Was it the same time that Claire Drake was there?
Claire Drake was not there. It was Billy Moore's actually at the time, and
okay.
You know, I would actually go and watch his practices whenever I could, and just, you know, tried to be around the rink as much as possible and learn from different coaches, and then got involved with Hockey Alberta at the time too.
Yeah, because it's, I know the Alberta Golden Bears men's hockey program is famous for other coaches coming out of it and people just going to watch their practices,
right? Yeah.
Like Ken Hitchcock and a number of other well-known coaches.
Absolutely, yeah. No, they've got a really good women's program as well that has had a ton of success over the years. And well, yeah, so, you know, then from U of A, you know, shortly, I think my wife and I, we spent 2 years there before we moved back to Medicine Hat, and it was essentially the job that kept me in Medicine Hat for as long as we did. And at some point I decided, you know, I wanted to be a career coach.
Gotcha. And did you make another stop at University of Lethbridge before you came south of the border, or did you go straight from there to Dartmouth?
Yeah, no, so what led me to Lethbridge was I was working on my graduate degree, master's degree in education, and a requirement was that I had to do a year of residency there. So prior to that, I was doing part-time study. Then at some point, I needed to go and do the year of residency, and so Medicine Hat College, they essentially allowed me to take the year off and go there and fulfill that requirement. And then when I was there, actually a guy by the name of Jim Fetter, who had coached in the NCAA for a number of years, he was at the University of Lethbridge, and then he left to go to the NCAA, and they were sort of stranded for a coach. And of the women's team, it was their first year of playing in Canada West. And, the long story short was the AD reached out and said, "Hey, I hear you're on campus here right now doing grad school. Would you be interested in coaching our team?" And that was the first ever experience coaching women's hockey.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So how did you end up at Dartmouth from there?
Well, I knew I wanted to be a career coach, and at the time back then, doing it in Canada wasn't the best path because there wasn't a lot of full-time coaching positions. So I took a job at North Country Community College, and my wife and I and our two young kids, we sold our home and bought one actually online without even seeing it first. We had the person that hired me from North Country Community College go and look at it, and so I spent a year there, coaching the women's program and building that. And we actually won the little championship of the league that we played in. And then the following year, Mark Hudak was promoted to be the head coach at Dartmouth. And I got to know him a little bit because when I returned back to Medicine Hat after finishing my master's degree and coaching for that 1 year, I ended up coaching the midget AAA girls team. And we had a lot of good young players on the team there that ended up going and playing in the NCAA. And so I got to know Mark during that time. And then, again, it's a long story. Like, we could spend a lot of time talking about the path, but Mark reached out and asked if I'd be interested in joining a staff. It was without a doubt probably the best decision I ever made from a career coaching move anyways.
Gotcha. All right. Well, we just want to touch on a couple more stops along the way just before you end up at Long Island University. After Dartmouth, you went to St. Norbert College and were the head coach there. And I believe just before we started recording, you told me you actually coached your daughter, who went to Shattuck St. Mary's Prep School and then went to St. Norbert. What was that like, coaching your daughter at St. Norbert?
Yeah, it without a doubt was probably best experience of my life. When you're a college coach, you don't get to spend as much time with your kids because when they're playing, you're playing. So you end up missing quite a bit. And I didn't try to push her one way or the other. And she was going through the whole recruiting process. And she had some opportunities to be a non-scholarship player at some Division I schools where she'd be more of a development type player, a depth player, practice player. And I just, at some point I said, Brooke, like, you only get one shot at it. It's like these 4 years, like my wife says, life's not a dress rehearsal. And, so after having some long conversations, I said, would you ever consider coming to St. Norbert College? You'd be able to help us. You'd be a really strong player for us. And I don't think it would be a problem within the team because the culture was really good there. And she ended up deciding, she'd do it. And we had an amazing time. Our team, we had a really good year that year. We unfortunately lost in the championship game. I think it was a championship game, or it might have been the semifinal. But I would not have traded it for anything.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, it was Coach Bob Gaudette, who was at Dartmouth. I remember chatting with him because he coached both his boys, and I talked to him about it. And he said that if you have a chance to do it, you do it. You give everything for everyone else's kids, so why would you not give that opportunity for your own?
As long as they're up for it, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so I know you had another stop at Yale, but let's talk about you coaching in China. How did that come about, and what was that experience like?
You get to meet a lot of people in this profession, and for years, well, at Dartmouth, we clashed pretty hard with Brown University, among many other schools, and Digit Murphy was the head coach there at the time, and I got to know her over the years, and I've always respected Digit, and I like that she was um, a trailblazer in a lot of different areas, and always
Still is.
pushing the standard. Yeah, and so anyways, she started calling me when I was at Yale, and she was asking about different players, and because she needed to find a list of players with Chinese heritage in them, and so I eventually she just said, "Hey Rob, why don't you come and be a part of this?" and shared with me what it's all about, and at the time it was very intriguing, and eventually I made the decision to join her and helping grow the game over in China, and ultimately prepare China for the Olympics, which it's kind of neat to see this vision that we put forward is actually going to happen. And Brian Adolski is over there basically taking the tail end of the plan, and he's going to have this team prepared and ready for the Olympics.
Gotcha.
So it's
And
exciting
folks
to
who
see
don't
the
know,
young kids.
for folks who don't know, there was a Canadian Women's Hockey League team that you were coaching in China. Is that correct?
Yeah, we essentially what we did is we created two teams that would play in the Canadian Women's Hockey League, and aside from growing the game over in China, we had North Americans that were skating alongside China's best, and the idea was if they're training with better, surrounded by better, competing against better, that ultimately they would become better prepared to play in the Olympics. And
looking back now, on before we get to LIU, who had the biggest influence on you as a coach? Who did you learn the most from on being a coach?
Well, I go back to my time when I was in Medicine Hat, like Brian Ellerman, who I worked with for 6 years. There's not a lot of people that would know his name in the NCAA circles, but definitely in Western Canada, Alberta, he had a really good career, and he was really ahead of the game at the time, and so I learned a lot from him about how to prepare teams and start a team and set goals with your athletes and then see it through. And I spent a lot of time also with Hockey Alberta's program of excellence, where I learned a lot from various coaches. We really benefited from a lot of the great coaches that were in the area. Like we'd have Billy Moores come in and talk to us, and Mel Davidson, and Mike Johnston, who coached in Pittsburgh, and now he coaches in the Western League out in Portland. So, just a lot of great educational sessions along the way. But, my time at Dartmouth with Coach Mark Hudak was pretty special. We had a lot of success there, and Mark was a great coach. Definitely learned a lot from him throughout that time, and also learned a lot on how to recruit Ivy Leagues. Recruiting Ivy is a lot different, obviously, than recruiting at scholarship schools. And I remember Mark always said, if you could recruit successfully at an Ivy League school, you could recruit anywhere. So
yeah, that makes sense.
But I've picked up from all the coaches along the way. You're always learning. You're never satisfied.
I'm going to ask you about that a little bit later on. All right, let's move on to Long Island University. So for folks who don't know, it's the entire university is located in both Brooklyn and Brookville, New York, has about 15,000 students. And the school's president, Kimberly Klein, decided to start both the women's and men's hockey program, starting with the women's program, first announcing it in 2018, and then later the men's team in 2020.
President Klein wanted to add women's hockey. And, at the time, she wanted it to be with our Division I school, which was in Brooklyn. So we had LIU Brooklyn, which was a D1 program, and then there was LIU Post that was in Brookville, that was a Division II school, Division II program. And so initially, actually pretty much every one of the founding members that visited, they visited the Brooklyn campus because that's where they thought they were going to be. And so when I was hired, there really wasn't much that was put in place other than we want a program. And so they had a couple of rink options. And so it was really put on my shoulders to go and make this happen. And so I met with people at the two different arenas, and the one that ultimately would have been the one that we'd play at was Chelsea Piers in Manhattan. But, after doing some more research and learning more about the different times that we had available, logistically, it just wouldn't work. Like, there was no way our students were going to be able to get from Chelsea Piers back to Brooklyn in time for school, or vice versa. If we started the day out in a classroom, the likelihood of being able to make it in time for practice wasn't great. So
because Chelsea Piers is on in Manhattan, and it's also on the west side, and
right.
Long Island's on the east side of Manhattan. Yeah,
that's right. So you just, anyone that's been in the city knows that the traffic is unpredictable, and so probably literally about a month before we were supposed to get going, we made the decision to relocate it to the Post campus. And during that time, both campuses merged to become one university, one Division I athletics department, where we had a number of programs in Brooklyn, and then a number of programs would be at the Brookville campus.
Gotcha. So how did you guys come up with, since you were combining the two teams, one was the Pioneers, the other one was the Blackbirds. How did you come up with the new name, the Sharks?
Well, I wasn't involved in that, but I know they put a committee together that included current students. They had some alumni involved as well, and they came up with some different options, different mascot options, and various colors. And eventually, it was voted on to use the Sharks. And they wanted to take the gold from the Pioneers, and they wanted to take the blue. That there was blue that was part of the Blackbirds. It was like black, gold, and a blue secondary color. And yeah, that's what they voted on. And when you look back, it was really quite impressive with what they came up with, because a lot of people have talked about our mascot and our colors, and in a very positive way.
Unique.
Yeah. So, for the new programs that have come on since then, they haven't had to deal with, trying to pull all the alumni into it, because all of our alumni are going to be Sharks, but the university has really been very progressive and moving forward and trying a way to grow athletics in some very challenging times.
Yeah. Unlike the men's program, which only had 6 months from the announcement of the program to when they actually fielded the team, you had a full year to do it. So, we had Tara Watchorn on the podcast recently from Stonehill College, where she has 2 full years to actually create a team. They're not even starting until next year. What did you do during that 1 year that you had to build the program?
Yeah,
aside from finding an arena, obviously, which you talked about already.
Yeah, like I back then, a lot of the decisions, commitments were happening really young. And so, I had the benefit of a list of prospective student athletes that I had from Yale. And so, although I took that 2-year little hiatus from the college ranks. Actually, it was really 1 year when I think about it, because the second year I wasn't coaching when I was there in China. I ended up being more of like a manager / advisor to the program. But anyways, I had the benefit of a list of prospective student athletes who were uncommitted, and basically spent that time going after those who would want to come and be a part of doing something really special. I mean, having the first ever, not just women's program, but college hockey program in all of, New York City, Long Island area was pretty unique. And, so I was able to pull together a group that wanted to be a part of it. And for the most part, we have, pretty much all, but I think it's 3 kids that are still with us, going into our 3rd year here. So it's crowded in the locker room right now. It's actually crowded in a lot of locker rooms because of COVID. Our reasons for being crowded is because I didn't want to cut any of the founding members, throughout this process. So I just said each year as I was recruiting, that it was going to get crowded in year 3 and 4. So we're going to deal with that and use it to our advantage and make sure that everyone has a great experience.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that a little bit later, so I might come back to it. But you did have some decent success in your first couple of years, right? First of all, you won your first game that you won was against St. Michael's, a 5-2 game in early November, and you ended up with an 11-10 conference record. That's pretty good. And correct me if I'm wrong, you yet to lose in the NUHA playoffs. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually it is. I had to think back because last year during the COVID year, it was Sacred Heart and us were the only school. Actually, Franklin Pierce played some games, but they never played in this modified league that we created. So Sacred Heart and us, we had some round robin play to determine who would host the best 2 out of 3 series, and we got a really, really good rivalry with them. And yeah, we ended up winning in overtime in the first game last year against them. And then we came back to our place and had another great game against Sacred Heart and found a way to win. And so we're 5-0 in playoffs right now.
Yeah, in your first year, you beat Sacred Heart in the semifinals, and then you beat St. Anne's 1-0 in the actual finals, not the semifinals.
Yeah. No,
so pretty good when the moments matter for the Sharks there. So a couple of things. I'm talking to you kind of early in mid-October, and you're off to a 2-6 start to the season. But you're coming off a great sweep of this past weekend. 3 of your 4 players were NUHA players of different types of NUHA players of the week. So looking at the season so far, what's gone better than expected and what hasn't gone as expected?
Well, I knew that it was going to be a real challenging start because we wanted to schedule some strong opponents, and we set our goal to win 50% of our non-conference opponents, and so far we've yet to beat a non-conference opponent, but we've definitely showed great improvement along the way. Even when I think back to last year in the COVID year, playing against Quinnipiac and Clarkson, to now we've made huge strides. The games are that much tighter. It's just we've got 30 players that have played in at least 1 game, and so right now my focus is more about getting better each game. Is yes, we want to win, and it would have been great to win some of those non-conference games in the first 6 that we played, but ultimately for us it's all about our conference season, and we're going to have an opportunity to play against some non-conference opponents throughout the year here still, but I'm really happy with where we're at right now. I would have wished to be able to get some other players in the lineup more often than what I have, but it's really hard when you can only dress 19 and you got 31.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And we'll talk about your staff. Erica Crom, who's new to your staff, she's a Brown grad, but actually from Long Island. I actually happened to have met her today because I'm in Minnesota at a tournament and she was scouting there, as well as Brent Troyen, your goalie coach. Maybe just talk about the folks you surrounded yourself with.
Yeah, the staff that was with us previously in the first 2 years, they ended up moving on. One to her alma mater, and the other one went to Providence, and they're doing really well. So, you know, I was pretty patient in the hiring process. You know, when we eventually got our ad out there, some people had reached out, and I knew of Erica back when she was a player. Obviously I knew of her family because her dad was playing in Calgary when I was growing up in Alberta. So when she expressed interest in wanting to be a coach, I knew right away that's who I wanted to bring into our program. And so we met, we had some really good conversations, and you know, eventually she made the commitment to join our staff, and she's done a great job for us. And then Brent Troyen is he's a professional goalie coach on Long Island. I made the decision to make Coach Troyen the second assistant coach as opposed to goalie coach, just because I felt it was better for our program to have not a whole lot of newness to it as we go into year 3. And so as I look back on it, it's been a really good decision, and Brent's doing a great job taking on the additional responsibilities. And again, I feel really lucky to have you know, got Erica to join our staff, because she's definitely going to be an amazing career coach. And she has the ultimate goal of becoming a head coach herself. So she's always pushing and trying to make us better while she's making herself better.
Well, perfect timing to ask my next question before we start getting into recruiting, which is, what have you personally done to kind of get better as a coach? Since you know you're all about player development, what are you doing to your coach development?
Yeah, I'm constantly learning and you know, trying to continue to push myself, whether it's be attending the virtual coaches conventions that are on. NHL hosts them, and the coaches site has hosted a couple every year up until COVID. Our coaches association has a conference down in Naples, and they get coaches up there to speak and present, and so you're always stealing ideas and trying to stay ahead. You know, I personally spent a lot of time talking with other coaches in different sports. I think there's a lot of crossover. I've learned a lot in what both soccer and lacrosse do. They have larger rosters, so what are they doing in practice to make sure the work to rest ratio is high? You know, we don't have an unlimited ice time, so it's like, what can we do to make sure that all 30 athletes on the ice are developing and improving in their game? And you know, so it's a lot of networking. It's just staying on top, a lot of reading, and keeping what works, and looking to tweak things that, you know, need to get better.
Gotcha. So like you said, you have 30 or 31 players on your roster. Obviously you're, you know, from what you've already mentioned, you're constantly juggling the lineup just to get everybody some playing time, and you know, obviously you're solving for wins. So, but more looking to recruiting, I see on the college commits website, you already have 4 commits for 2022, and then you've had an additional 4 commits this year for 2023. So where are you at with how you're thinking about recruiting for future years, and kind of what are some of the challenges that are going on these days because of the new NCAA rules and obviously because of COVID?
Yeah, well, we definitely have a 6-year plan. Like every year I'm adding a year as we graduate a year. And so we're always trying to know what our needs are and what we're looking for. And, you know, so from a recruiting perspective, although it shows that we're pretty much done in terms of meeting our needs for each of those classes, we're always looking, and we're always knowing who's out there and who's available, because you never know. You know, with the transfer portal now, and you know, it's a lot more freer for student athletes to change midway through their college career if they're not happy. So you kind of have to have a finger on the pulse of what's going out there in the whole recruiting landscape. And so our focus right now is really looking at the 11th graders that are uncommitted, as well as the 10th graders and 9th graders, and just preparing ourselves for June 15th so that we have a good handle on who the top prospects are. And it's not just in North America, but we also recruit in Europe, and that's been very successful for us to keep those networks as well.
Yeah, and in fact, when I looked at your roster, there was no high concentration of any location specifically. Like, not all Canadians, not all Minnesotans, and obviously not all like from the New England area. And I, as I kind of tested to earlier, that I did see Erica out recruiting today, scouting some big events. So, what advice do you have then for players who are those like 2023s or 2022s even, who are kind of challenged with kind of the backlog, given, like you said, the transfer portal, extra year of eligibility, et cetera? What advice would you have for them?
Yeah, I think sometimes young players' hockey experience prior to entering college all of a sudden becomes a little bit too stressful for them because they're so worried about the future, and they see or hear or read about kids that have committed and maybe they've not committed, but really, like, I think the best thing to do is just, we have a saying, be where your feet are, be where you are, and just make every day count, and just focus on having fun and playing the game and competing hard and trying to get better each day. And eventually those student athletes, they will end up where they're meant to be. I think that sometimes, actually not sometimes, a lot of times it becomes too stressful on the families because there's so much panic. Oh my God, your teammates are all committed and you're not. And then they start spending so much time and energy on trying to find a place for their daughter, for those that have sons to go and be, and they forget about enjoying the present. And so, I think just put all your efforts in trying to be the very best you can be each day, and trust that, things will work out. Like, there are a lot of opportunities, and it's not always going to be the NCAA Division I or III. Like, there's a lot of amazing club programs that are out there that offer a lot. And ultimately, whether it's club or the NCAA, you're a student athlete and you're representing your school. And so I think the best advice I can give is don't get hung up on D1 or D3, or whether you have a scholarship or you don't have a scholarship. Find a place where you're going to be happy, and understand that the experience that you're looking for has to be the right fit, because at the Division I level, it's a huge commitment and undertaking to the athlete side of it, and that has to be a priority. Like, they have to be fully committed to being an elite athlete, and the expectations are that, yeah, you're still going to have an amazing experience and you're going to take a lot out of your college experience, but you truly need to be committed to the elite athlete side of things if you're going to enjoy it. Because if you're not fully committed to that, you're going to struggle. And so, enjoy being where you're at right now. And then eventually, when you make a decision as to where you're going to go and be a college student athlete, find a place that's going to match who you are. Because if it doesn't match, then that's when, there's going to be problems. And
that's some great advice. Yeah.
Like my wife says, it's not a dress rehearsal. And yeah, you can transfer, but my own daughter experienced it. When you transfer, it's kind of like starting over again. You're going to go in, you got to prove yourself, you got to earn your time, and make new friends, and adapt and adjust. So a lot of times prospective student athletes can avoid all that by making sure that it's the right fit, and matching the athlete side of where you're going is really important.
Gotcha. Well, I hope a lot of players and parents take that advice. So before we wrap up, where can folks learn more about the Long Island University Sharks program, and how can they kind of, let folks know at your program that they're interested in kind of getting seen by you guys?
Yeah, on our social media, whether it's Instagram or Twitter, there's recruiting questionnaires that are on there, and like you mentioned, you'd met Erica, Coach Crom, earlier at the NIT, and that's her first big recruiting event. But we go to all the major events, and if we're not physically there, we will definitely watch through the different video options that are made available to us. But again, I don't think prospective student athletes need to spend all their time during the summer months going to all these different showcases. You're going to be seen, the kids are going to be seen, and for LIU, we'll be out to the major events, and ultimately we're looking for kids that work really hard, and great people, great character. They're going to be a good fit in the locker room, have good families, where they're supportive families, and they're not going to over involve themselves in the process. They're going to allow the kids to go through that process and figure things out along the way. They're there for support, but they shouldn't be over involving themselves in it. And but yeah, like you can send an email to any one of us coaches introducing yourself. It's always a good idea to put your name in the subject heading, and what position you are, and what grad year you are, and what team you are. I think that those key pieces of information are really helpful to have in there. I'm sure a lot of coaches have said this on here. Make sure you address the coach by the right name and right school. Sometimes you do the cut and paste and you forget to make a few changes there, and sometimes that can rub some programs the wrong way, even though I know what they're doing and what their intentions are all good. But yeah, I mean, we want to make sure that we develop leaders here at LAU, and we're providing a great student athlete experience and graduating proud alumni, while at the same time trying to win championships. And that's what we want here at LAU.
That's a great philosophy and a great strategy to have in terms of both player development and team success. So Rob, I really want to thank you for coming on the Champs App podcast. It was great learning about your coaching history, learning obviously about Long Island University, and then obviously your recruiting advice that you've just been sharing with us. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you. And I also want to thank you for providing this. I think what you're doing is great information for parents and for prospective student athletes. And as a parent yourself, I think you're learning a lot along the way, and you'll be able to provide good advice to not just your kids, but other kids as well.
I want to thank Rob for coming on the podcast. It was great to hear all about his coaching stops, how the LIU program started, and his advice for players and parents during these unique recruiting times. And remember, if you got something out of today's episode, we'd really appreciate it if you'd like, follow, subscribe, and even better if you could leave us a review, so we can keep sharing this important hockey information with folks just like you.